She was born without a shadow, and that wasn't normal. The midday sun beat down on the village of Oakhaven, painting long, distorted figures behind every person who walked its dusty paths. Every person, that is, except for Lyra. From the moment she drew her first breath, bathed in the gentle light filtering through her mother's window, Lyra was an anomaly. She cast no shadow, a childhood of whispers. Lyra, Lyra's mother, a woman of 35 with kind eyes and hands calloused from years of tending her garden, remembered the day vividly. The midwife, old Granny Willow, had gasped, clutching her chest. Lyra, still weak but overflowing with love for her newborn, hadn't understood. It wasn't until she held Lyra up to the morning sun, her tiny form perfectly silhouetted against the bright window, yet nothing dark appeared behind her on the wooden floor, that the unsettling truth settled in. Lyra, her beautiful baby girl, was born without a shadow. As Lyra grew, the absence became more pronounced, a stark contrast to the world around her. At 5, playing in the sun-drenched village square, other children's shadows stretched and danced behind them as they ran. Lyra's form, however, was always singular, defined only by her own outline. The other children, intuitive and sometimes cruel, noticed. They would point, their young voices hushed, their games momentarily forgotten. Lyra, a bright and curious child, would look behind her, a small frown on her face, confused by their whispers and the strange emptiness where her shadow should be. Her father, Thomas, a sturdy blacksmith of 40 with a booming laugh that now rarely surfaced, tried to protect her. He would often shield her from the sun, or direct her play to shadier spots beneath the ancient oak tree. But he couldn't shield her from the whispers. The adults, too, noticed. They would glance, then quickly look away, a superstitious dread flickering in their eyes. In Oakhaven, where ancient folklore was woven into the very fabric of life, a shadow was not just an absence of light, it was a reflection of the soul, a tether to the physical world. To be without one was deeply unsettling. Lyra's childhood was spent largely within the confines of her family home. Lyra homeschooled her, teaching her to read and write, to tend the garden, to draw. Lyra, now 12, found solace in art. She would spend hours sketching, meticulously detailing the shadows cast by trees, by houses, by her own hands. It was a strange fascination, an attempt to understand the part of reality that eluded her. She drew shadows with an intensity that belied her age, as if by drawing them, she could somehow conjure her own. The growing chasm. As Lyra blossomed into a young woman, her lack of a shadow became less a curiosity and more a mark of her otherness. At 18, she possessed a quiet grace, her movements fluid and light, almost ethereal. Her eyes, the color of moss after a spring rain, held a depth beyond her years, a reflection of a life lived under a strange, unspoken scrutiny. The village market, once a place of bustling life, felt like a gauntlet. People would part as she approached, their eyes flicking to the empty space behind her. Vendors would offer her goods with a hurried politeness, unwilling to engage in prolonged conversation. Elias, the old storyteller, a man in his 80s whose mind was a living archive of Oakhaven's myths and legends, would sometimes observe Lyra from his porch. His eyes, clouded with age, held a strange mixture of pity and fear. He spoke of ancient tales, of beings who walked between worlds, untethered by earthly bonds. Lyra knew, without being told, that he spoke of people like her. The isolation deepened. Lyra longed for connection, for the simple acceptance that others took for granted. She watched young couples walk hand in hand, their shadows merging into one long, dancing form. She saw children chasing their own fleeting silhouettes on sunny days, their laughter echoing in the air. These were experiences denied to her. She was a ghost in plain sight, a vivid presence that left no trace. Thomas, her father, grew increasingly protective, a silent sentinel against the village's unspoken judgments. He would accompany her on errands, his own sturdy shadow a defiant contrast to her lack thereof. Lyra, ever gentle, tried to instill in Lyra a sense of self-worth that transcended her anomaly. She would speak of Lyra's quick mind, her artistic talent, her kind heart. But even Lyra, in her quiet moments, couldn't shake the nagging question, why? The ancient texts. Lyra, at 25, felt an unyielding need to understand. Her artistic fascination with shadows had evolved into a scholarly obsession. She devoured every book she could find on light, on perception, on ancient lore. She traveled always in the company of her father, a silent guardian, to larger towns, seeking out libraries and old booksellers, searching for any mention, any theory, about beings without shadows. Her search led her to Professor Alaric Thorne, a reclusive academic in his late 60s, living in a dusty, cluttered house filled with books in the city of Eldoria, a day's journey from Oakhaven. He was rumored to be an expert in forgotten histories and esoteric phenomena. Lyra, introduced by her father, approached him with trepidation, her lack of a shadow a stark proclamation of her purpose. Professor Thorne, a man with a wild mane of white hair and eyes that sparkled with intellectual curiosity, didn't flinch. He merely nodded, his gaze lingering briefly on the floor behind her. He had heard the whispers, the folklore. He had been waiting for someone like her. He led her to a hidden section of his library, filled with ancient, brittle scrolls and leather-bound tomes. He spoke of legends, not just Oakhaven's, but from across the world. Tales of shadowless ones, beings who were said to exist slightly out of sync with the physical plane. They were sometimes revered as blessings, sometimes feared as omens, but always marked by their lack of an earthly reflection. He showed her diagrams, symbols, passages in dead languages that hinted at explanations. One recurring theme emerged: the echo chamber. It was not a physical place, he explained, but a metaphorical space, a vibrational frequency where beings without shadows resided before entering the solid world. These beings, the legends claimed, were often born with a unique sensitivity, a deeper connection to the unseen. Their lack of a shadow was a sign of their incomplete tether to this reality, a lingering connection to their origin. Lyra listened, captivated. The professor spoke of how sometimes, in rare instances, the veil between these realms thinned, and a being from the echo chamber could partially cross over, manifesting in the solid world without a complete physical anchor. Their shadow, their true anchor, remained in the echo chamber. The echo chamber. The professor, a man dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge, proposed a radical theory. What if the shadow wasn't missing, but simply elsewhere? What if it existed in another vibrational plane, and could, under specific circumstances, be rejoined? He spoke of ancient rituals, not of magic, but of precise alignments, of resonant frequencies, of moments when the veil between worlds was thin enough to allow for a retethering. He showed her a particular text, a fragile scroll depicting a celestial alignment, a rare convergence of planetary bodies, that was said to create a bridge of whispers between the echo chamber and the solid world. It was a phenomenon predicted to occur only once every few centuries. And, according to his calculations, that alignment was due to happen in a year's time. The location where the veil would be thinnest, the text suggested, was a place of significant natural energy, a spot where the Earth's own vibrations resonated deeply. He pointed to a crude map drawn on the scroll. It depicted a specific location, marked by an ancient standing stone, deep within the Whispering Woods, not far from Oakhaven. A surge of something akin to hope, raw and terrifying, coursed through Lyra. For the first time in her life, there was a glimmer of an answer, a possibility of being truly whole. But the professor also warned her. The process was fraught with danger. Rejoining a shadow, a being's very essence, was not a simple act. It could be unstable, unpredictable. There was no guarantee of success, and the consequences of failure were unknown. Thomas, who had listened in quiet apprehension, now expressed his deep concern. He saw the fire in Lyra's eyes, the desperate longing for normalcy. He didn't understand the complex theories, but he understood the risk to his daughter. Alara, upon hearing the news, felt a familiar ache of fear, but also a profound empathy for Lyra's lifelong struggle. She wanted her daughter to be whole, to be free of the constant stigma. The Bridge of Whispers. The year that followed was one of intense preparation. Lyra immersed herself in the professor's research, learning about the subtle energies, the specific meditations, the precise timing required for the alignment. She trained her body and mind, preparing for a moment that would either complete her or shatter her. Thomas, despite his fears, helped her. He learned about the constellations, about the phases of the moon, determined to support his daughter in her pursuit of completeness. Alara gathered herbs, preparing tonics to strengthen Lyra, to calm her nerves. As the day of the celestial alignment approached, a profound sense of anticipation, mixed with dread, settled over them. They traveled to the Whispering Woods, guided by the professor's calculations and the ancient map. The standing stone was massive, covered in intricate, weathered carvings, pulsing with a subtle, unseen energy. Professor Thorne, now frail but his eyes alight with intellectual fervor, set up his instruments, an intricate array of crystals, mirrors, and precisely calibrated sundials. He explained the final steps. Lyra would need to sit within a specific circle of stones at the moment of peak alignment, focusing her consciousness, her very being, on the idea of reunion, of drawing her shadow back to her. The night arrived, clear and crisp, the stars a brilliant tapestry overhead. Lyra sat in the center of the stone circle, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Thomas stood nearby, a silent, watchful guardian. Alara held her breath, her hands clasped tightly. Professor Thorne, his voice low and steady, began to chant, his words a rhythmic drone in a language lost to time, guiding Lyra through the meditation. As the planets aligned, a strange phenomenon began. The air around Lyra shimmered, almost vibrating. A faint, silvery mist began to coalesce behind her, swirling and taking form. It was translucent at first, a faint outline of her own shape, but slowly, steadily, it began to darken, to solidify. Lyra felt a pull, a strange, internal tug, as if an invisible thread were being drawn from within her. It wasn't painful, but it was profoundly unsettling, a sensation of something long lost finally returning. She focused, willing it to happen, pouring all her years of longing into this single, transformative moment. The rejoining. The mist behind her deepened, becoming a rich, inky black. It moved with her, shifting as she subtly adjusted her posture, mirroring her form with an uncanny accuracy. It was almost complete. The professor's chanting intensified, his voice strained. Thomas gripped the ancient stone beside him, his knuckles white. Alara whispered a silent prayer. Then, a sudden jolt. Not from the outside, but from within Lyra. A powerful surge of energy, like a river finding its long-lost course. She gasped, her eyes flying open. For a split second, the world seemed to ripple around her. She felt an overwhelming sense of completeness, as if a missing piece of her very being had finally slotted into place. And then, it was done. The silvery mist had vanished. Behind Lyra, on the ancient earth, lay a perfect, sharp-edged shadow. It was distinct, dark, and utterly hers. It moved when she moved, stretched when she stretched, a silent, undeniable testament to her new reality. Thomas let out a shaky breath, a sound of profound relief. Alara wept, silent tears streaming down her face. Professor Thorne leaned back against the standing stone, a look of awe and exhaustion on his face. Lyra stood up, slowly, tentatively. She took a step, then another, watching her shadow dance behind her. It was strange, foreign, yet utterly familiar. A weight lifted from her shoulders, a burden she hadn't realized she had carried until it was gone. She reached out, almost touching the dark form on the ground, a physical manifestation of her newly found wholeness. She looked at her parents, her eyes shining with tears that were not of sorrow, but of overwhelming joy. She saw the relief, the love, the profound understanding in their faces. She was no longer an anomaly. She was whole, she was tethered. Returning to Oakhaven, Lyra walked with a newfound confidence. The villagers, at first, still cast wary glances, but then they saw it. Her shadow, long and dark in the setting sun, following her every step. The whispers didn't cease entirely, but they changed. They became whispers of wonder, of a miracle, of the girl who was once without, now found. Lyra, now whole, continued her life in Oakhaven. She still drew, but now her art was infused with a deeper understanding of light and shadow, of presence and absence. She was still Lyra, the quiet, graceful woman with moss-green eyes. But now, when the sun shone down, she was truly a part of the world, leaving a dark, undeniable mark on the earth, a testament to her journey from being unseen to utterly present. Her past, a life lived in 2 dimensions, had finally, beautifully, gained its third.